Then I go back to the house, tear that woman's mouth, preaching and crying, tell me that I'm lying about a job that I never could find.
Democrats who lauded welfare reform in the 90s only to begin dismantling it a little over a decade later. And gentlemen, as you know by now, Hussein Obama, and this is being done in incremental fashion. This is not being done all at once. And the floodgates, as I will show you, may not be open on this for a while. They're creeping open now. But as you know, Hussein's slowly eroding the TANF work requirements, temporary assistance for needy families. And as I'll show you later, the states have also been doing this as well, where your taxpayer dollars will still be spent to do it, but they're manipulating this in a way where they can get tax credits and lower the work requirement threshold. So eventually, we are on a path to where there will be no work requirement whatsoever, and welfare reform will be totally dismantled. Let's see. Let's go back in time right now to 2008 in a conversation Hussein Obama was having with Rick Warren back in 2008 concerning these TANF work requirements. Take it away, Hussein.
A lot of times candidates are accused of flip-flopping, but actually sometimes flip-flopping is smart because you actually have decided a better position based on flipped on. You've changed on because you actually see it differently. What's the most significant position you held 10 years ago that you no longer hold today, that you've flipped on? You've changed on because you actually see it differently.
I'm trying to think back 10 years ago. I think that a good example would be the issue of welfare reform, where I always believed that welfare had to be changed. I was much more concerned 10 years ago when President Clinton initially signed the bill that this could have disastrous results. I worked in the Illinois legislature to make sure that we were providing child care and health care, other support services for the women who were going to be kicked off the rolls after a certain time. It worked better than I think a lot of people anticipated. And you know, one of the things that I am absolutely convinced of is that we have to have work as a centerpiece of any social policy. Not only because ultimately people who work are going to get more income, but the intrinsic dignity of work, the sense of purpose.
We were made for work.
We're made for work. And
I should also mention this, even as TANF caseloads were falling, food stamp participation started going up, and a large part of that is the farm bill that George W. Bush signed in 2002, and his Congress sent him, which made it much easier to get on food stamps. So even before the recession, the Great Recession of 2008, continuing until now, as economic growth has stagnated and we are heading for a double dip, as high unemployment is the norm, food stamp enrollment was going up long before the recession, and a lot of the TANF spending that has been replaced by food stamps. So they're basically, even the successes of TANF before they started trying to dismantle it were being negated by the massive expansion of food stamps. Moving on to the final section of this. After welfare reform, TANF caseloads fell dramatically. Child poverty declined, unmarried birth rates fell, and many welfare recipients went to work. While this indicated the success of the program, it also meant that the substantial caseload declines eroded the 50% work requirements, as stated in testimony to the subcommittee in March 2007. I've got all the links going by, and that's the latest data available at the time. 17 states and 2 territories face an effective overall participation rate of 0%, and nationally the adjusted target due to caseload reduction was only 6%. So the success of the program and the unforeseen generosity of the credit led many states to have no work requirement at all. Congress passed the Deficit Reduction Act of 2005 to address these issues and strengthen the work requirements to ensure states move more families from welfare to work. The bill reset the credit states receive for reducing caseloads, so in future years, work requirements would be only reduced if their caseloads fell from fiscal year 2005 levels. However, states found other creative ways to meet the federal requirements, and I'm underlining the important parts here. One way was a little-known provision from a 1999 federal regulation which became known as excess MOE, or maintenance of effort. Under federal law, states must maintain a minimum level of state spending in the TANF program, and you'll see how they've spent more and reduced work requirements, which actually runs contradictory to the reason it was created. Under federal law, states must maintain a minimum level of state spending in the TANF program, or maintenance of effort. After TANF was created, there were debates in the administration about some of the MOE provisions during the regulatory process and how they would function. So, under this policy, a state that reported spending more than their required level would get credit that would lower their work rate. The idea was that if states spent more than required and therefore may have had a higher caseload than if they spent only the required amount, HHS would not count those extra cases against them. We soon saw the provision, this is after the Deficit Reduction Act became law in 2006, which had lain dormant since TANF's inception, became a much bigger issue. And the following graphics illustrate what happened to work rates and state spending. You can see how the work participation rates up until you can see the shaded after the Deficit Reduction Act in red. You can see how it started to fall quite a bit from the average of when TANF was first initiated in fiscal year 1997. So you can see the work participation rates are falling. That's what this program was created for, to have higher participation rates, to move people from welfare to work. And then you can see how state spending on TANF from 1998 to fiscal year 2005, it was actually lower than the rate of inflation. The program was static. It was actually, I'm not saying I'm in favor of these massive federal welfare programs, but you can see how right after the Deficit Reduction Act, they started using this maintenance of effort to manipulate it and lower their work requirements. You see how the state spending on TANF exploded. It's obvious. In fiscal year 2004, only one state reported spending more than 100% of the required MOE level. By fiscal year 2009, 23 states were reporting spending more than 100% of the required level. This resulted in large excess MOE claims that reduced work rate requirements for many states. Instead of more recipients working, work participation rates have declined since the Deficit Reduction Act of 2006, and more than half of all TANF recipients have not been required to work for any amount of time over an entire year. Then we have the problem of third-party spending counted in TANF maintenance of effort. You can see how some states began new child care or after-school programs, pre-kindergarten classes, or state-funded earned income tax credit programs after welfare reform became law. Although most had not decided to report this spending as MOE in the past, the strengthened work requirements in the DRA caused many states to look for and report these expenditures as part of the TANF program. One state reviewed its expenditures across 44 state programs and secured enough excess MOE to avoid a work participation rate penalty in 2007. All this third-party spending being counted, and that helps them increase their spending to hit their threshold and use these maintenance of effort credits to lower their work participation rate. You see how that's counterproductive. You can see how food banks and volunteer hours are used towards counting in this spending. It has nothing to do with state spending, but they're using it. They're manipulating it. Does that surprise you? In closing, folks, if we continue on this trajectory, you will see welfare have absolutely no work requirements whatsoever. We've seen this in food stamps, how food stamp spending has absolutely exploded. It was moving greater than the rate of inflation even before this recession, and during the recession, this great continuing recession, it has exploded even further. So we've effectively, we're almost to the point where we're a European welfare state. So that's what awaits us in the future, unfortunately. And you see how TANF work requirements, etc., are just being death by 1,000 cuts, slowly being circumvented and annihilated. And again, I think I also need to mention the HHS issuing these waivers. Only Congress can make law. I did mention that in one of the screenshots. So I don't know how unelected bureaucrats get all this power. I guess it's a Congress who is willingly, a limp-wristed Congress that is willingly outsourcing its power and allowing itself to be circumvented. It's really sad. Have a nice day.